This is exciting because new. Took me forever to figure out. It should be a simple thing, but it wasn't for me. For some whatever reason. Mm, and there we are. Okay, awesome. So,
Great.
all right, let's get going. Okay, it's funny because there's a little lag on the video, and so it just I don't know. It's over to the side of me, and whatever it is, it is. But so
Okay.
I'm just going to get going. So, everybody, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm knowing that you're going to be happy that you're here. I'm Kim Sorrelle. I speak, I write, I get to do a lot of fun things in life, but my favorite thing to do by far is to meet people, and I get to meet some absolutely extraordinary people. I have been so excited for this particular time with Phyllis. She uh, wants to change our nation, wants to change the world, wants to change how people look at mental health and not just the way they look at it, but like how do we do better in our country and what's going on and how do we do better personally. So I've been so excited for this whole time. Phyllis, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really a delight to be here and have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. My word. It's a delight for me to have you. So thank you. Thank you. So Phyllis, I want people to really get to know like what brought you from where you were to where you are, how your path, how you got there. So I want to start with 8-year-old Phyllis. Can you tell us about 8-year-old Phyllis?
Yeah. And I think my story is not unique. So I really want to say that. Like we all have a journey, and many of us, our journey started with trauma. And I had early childhood trauma, and I had buried all the memories of what happened to me as a young child. And all I had left was fears and a feeling of I was afraid of the dark, I was afraid of spiders. And I had this kind of overwhelming sense that something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what it was. And when I grew up, nobody talked about psychology. Nobody really even talked about your feelings to be in the world that I grew up in. And so it was a very undistinguished kind of mindset and heart set that I lived in. I just this sort of feeling like I had to hide who I was, and I was just felt like I never belonged. And I think that's true for a lot of people, whether they remember what happened to them or not, because I think that's one of the effects of early childhood trauma is that you unless someone says this wasn't your fault, someone else was mentally not well and they did something to you that hurt you, but there's nothing wrong with you. And there is help for what you've been left with in terms of feelings and beliefs about yourself. If you don't get that, those feelings just feel like the truth of who you are. And so you do the best you can to adapt. And we all adapt in different ways. And having been a psychotherapist for 35 years, I've seen the whole gamut of how people adapt. Some people become depressed and withdrawn. Some people become highly anxious and have obsessive obsessions that they try to manage. Some people become addicts. Some people become people pleasers or workaholics or ragers or hermits. We find some way to cope. And my main way was probably to become a pleaser and to be a really hard worker. So I was a really good student in school. And interestingly enough, some of my schoolmates contacted me in the last couple of years they found me on Facebook or whatever, and nobody would have had a clue when I told them what my childhood was like because I looked okay. And I think most of us do. We try our best to look okay. Um, so long story short, I would say I was pretty much of an introvert maybe by nature and maybe as a result partly of what happened to me. And I also had a very strong spiritual striving and deep desire for a connection to a loving presence. And I had some experiences like that. But again, I had no language for any of that. Long story short, in my mid 30s, I had three little children, was in a very dysfunctional marriage, and kind of went through that dark night of the soul that many of us do when our coping mechanisms just aren't working anymore to keep out the pain that is trying to surface and really wants to be healed. And I ended up in therapy. And that was a time in my younger years where people were just starting to talk about going to therapy. So the timing was good. And I began to remember what happened to me, or at least some of it. And it changed my life. I was no longer a mystery to myself. I really understood that there was a beautiful, innocent essence inside of me that no amount of hurt could hurt or change. And that began to be, I began to peel back the layers of what covered up that essential part of myself, and was able to leave that relationship. I was a single mother for a long time, and then I um, developed a psychotherapy practice, and I've worked with hundreds of people, lots of trauma, lots of family dysfunction, and the after effects of untreated family dysfunction. And I was fortunate enough to have a wonderful second marriage that was, gratifying and healthy and loving. And I think that's many people's story, that when they have a chance to heal what hurt them, they're able to make more functional, more healthy, more loving, kind relationships. And that's the whole point of psychotherapy, is that we can heal the worst of what's happened to us, and also the worst of what we've done. For many of us, we've also hurt other people, and I have, out of ignorance or out of projecting my own shadow onto other people, and have done my best to make amends for some of those things over the years. And I think that's our human story, honestly, that we're
I
not just, go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah, I think you're so right. I mean, there are so many people. It's interesting. Just this past weekend, I was at a conference and with a woman I've known for quite some time, and she told me kind of the rest of the story. And she had suppressed for years memories, and she ended up being a victim more than once, which
right.
is so interesting to me that uh, the world might think, or people might think, some things that are so opposite of truth. Quite often things are just so opposite of what you think they are. So if someone's been hurt, someone's been abused, sexually abused, the chances of them being a victim again are greatly increased. and and you would think that if you ever were, you'd have this guard up and you'd be tough and there's no way, but there's a vulnerability that happens. Can you talk about
Right.
that? I'd love for you to.
I can absolutely talk about that. And that actually is my story. And I actually wrote my master's thesis on that issue, that people who have been victimized, who have not had a chance to heal, are much more likely to be victimized again. And one of the reasons for that, and this is well known in the psychological world, but it's not necessarily common knowledge. And that is that for many people who have been hurt by other human beings, unconsciously they've learned to be helpless. Fighting back didn't work. Um, Either they were threatened with further harm if they resisted the abuse, or other people were threatened, like their family was threatened, or they were just so physically overpowered that it was useless to resist. And so what they learned was that a survival technique was actually to become passive and helpless and just wait for it to be over. And I think that, although a lot of what happened to me, I think, was pre-verbal, because my memories go back to infancy, the ones that I was able to recover. I think that's what my psyche decided on an unconscious level to do. And so I did experience having encounters with unhealthy people who hurt me later on in life. And that's part of what drove me to therapy, actually, was that there was this sense that I am not who I am behaving to be. And I don't know how to stop these unconscious reactions, because they're unconscious and they're driven by an unconsciously untreated wound. And that was one of the great gifts of therapy for me, was that I was able to break that cycle. And that's what I would love to see for everyone, that no matter what the harm is, that so many of us have suffered, definitely not alone in that category, that we have a chance to heal so that we can make different choices and we can have better boundaries, and we can protect ourselves when need be, and we can have a voice when we need to have one that says no or stop or get us out of a bad situation, but also try to heal as a collective, not just on the individual level, but as communities, as nations, as a race of human beings, that we really try to heal the people who went down the road of becoming perpetrators, because many people do. And that's the outcome of their untreated victimization, that they've identified with the aggressor, unlike those who are more in my category, who identified with being more helpless or passive. The other side is that many people identify with the aggressor and they continue to act out on others in some form the hurt that was done to them. And they need help and healing just as much as anyone. And so I would love to see a human race, a country, a community, a state, whatever you want to call it, that is committed to healing all of us as really a priority for our agendas, whether it's on an individual, community, or national or international level.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Phyllis, I would love for you to speak to the fact that people who have not been through therapy, people who have not really studied this much or whatever. There's a lot of people that would say repressed memories, is it really a thing? How do we know that's accurate? I remember, I don't remember if it was on 60 Minutes or what it was on, but years and years ago, probably in the
Yeah,
1970s or something, they did a
yeah,
whole thing on it. Do you know what I'm talking
yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah,
and
totally.
and made it sound like people were just making stuff up, just whatever, making it up. And so I'd love for you to address that.
Well, I can't say for certain that there isn't someone out there or some people out there who have made something up. But by and large, my own personal experience and my experience as a therapist is you cannot make up the body sensations, the deep level of emotional pain that you feel, the flashbacks that come unwanted into your brain. You can't make this stuff up. And if you've ever sat with someone who is in the midst of remembering something that was really traumatic that happened to them with another person, and so often it's in the family or in close associations with the family, um, there is no way that they could make up what you're experiencing watching them. There's just no way. Um, and for many, and I'll tell you, I had a client, and this is a good story, I think, to illustrate what you're talking about. Um, there was a client that I saw who, a young, a child, young teenager who told a story that I actually didn't believe. And that was the only time in my practice that I didn't believe the story that a client told me. And I felt terrible about it. But there was something that didn't ring true about the story. And luckily for me, and I say really fortunately for me, her mother called me many, many years later and told me that um, she confessed that she had made that story up.
Wow. Wow.
And that is very, very unusual. Did she have sexual abuse? Yes, she did. But the story she told was an extremely exaggerated one. And I think it was for attention, it was for whatever. But I'm saying that to your audience to say that's very, very unusual.
Mm.
Um, and so and that was a big, I think that was the pushback. That whole false memory syndrome society was a big pushback around particularly women, but men also, finally feeling that there was societal permission to say that they had been sexually abused. Um, and so, of course, there was pushback. And I remember reading a story in a magazine about the false memory syndrome society whole push about people are making this stuff up and therapists are encouraging their clients to make up these stories and whatever, which I think is definitely not true. Um, and there was a story about a woman who had been sexually abused by her father, and her mother walked in on it
Mm.
and saw it. And then s- refuse to believe that it happened. And I think that's part of the trauma is that people don't want to know because it's awful. A mother doesn't want to know that her husband is sexually abusing her daughter. And so it's understandable, but it's also not the truth,
Right,
if that
right.
makes sense.
Yeah, well, and it's sort of a double whammy to the victim because it's like, first of all,
Definitely.
I'm victimized, and then secondly, I'm not being believed, or the people that should be doing something about it aren't doing something about it. I have a
Right,
friend who her and her sisters were all abused, and she knows that her parents knew, but did absolutely nothing about it. I know several stories like that. Why I can imagine as a mom, like if my daughter or my son, but in particular, I mean, it happens to women more than men, right? So my daughter ever came to me and said something was going on, I'd be looking into it. I'd be like, what is going? I sure
right.
feel like that's exactly what I would be doing. Why is it that some people just choose to ignore it and let it continue?
Well, I worked for several years in a sexual abuse treatment program early on in my career as a psychotherapist. And we had a group in that program that was called the Non-Offending Parents Group. And it was largely made up of mothers whose daughters had reported abuse either by a father or a stepfather or some other family member. And and I really saw up close and personal how difficult it was for some of these mothers to accept that their daughters were telling the truth. And there were many reasons. Probably the biggest one was that the mothers themselves had unhealed sexual abuse that had never come to the surface. And so their daughters bringing this up brought up material of their own that was repressed and that they really did not want to have come up to the surface unconsciously. This nobody does this on purpose. Um, Another huge reason why sometimes parents don't believe their children, and this was really the case for many of the mothers that we worked with in this program, is that they depended on the abuser for their income, for their livelihood, for their home. They had other children by this person. And so it would have meant the total loss of the family that they had, and often their income and their home, to believe that the perpetration had happened. And as awful as that might sound, it's human also. People are scared, and they don't know how they're going to go on. And often they've loved this person. And then to understand that this person violated their child, and sometimes their own child, is a big stretch to go in one's own understanding emotionally and mentally. And the other big reason that we found, and this is interesting, is that, when a daughter comes into puberty and is developing and is a beautiful young woman, sometimes mothers have a hard time accepting that and feeling older and feeling less attractive. And then to find out that their spouse was attracted to or molesting their daughter is just psychologically more than they can handle. So there's many reasons, and they all require deep compassion. We're human, we're fallible, we don't always get it, we're triggered. And that's why treatment with compassion and deep understanding and helping people understand the dynamics they've been caught in, so that it's not about blame and shame, it's about how do we heal. But those are some of the things that I learned working
Uh,
in that.
so interesting. That's so interesting. I am kind of loving it that you're talking about compassion, uh, because hurt people. I mean, you hear that, right? And so when I hear about somebody who's doing something to somebody or has done, I always wonder, well, what happened in their childhood, that they
Right,
didn't deal with, right? But I've also not been super compassionate, I have to admit, to moms who have been told it's going on or no. I mean, you
right,
talked about one woman who walked in on it, and
right,
and then just kind of to me it felt like they were choosing their husband, father, stepfather, over their daughter. Like that was a choice that they were making, even if they like I know situations where they've admitted to their daughter, yeah, I know what's happening, but I
Right,
don't want to change my lifestyle. I don't want to lose our house. I
right.
don't want to, right?
Well,
And
and it is hard to feel compassion. Um, but I think the other missing piece in the story is that we have to make it safe for the perpetrator to admit what they've done and also help the perpetrator. And sometimes the perpetrator needs to have consequences for sure, but they didn't get born a sexual molester. Nobody, no baby is born that way. Something happens to people that they end up committing this kind of a crime. So as a society, we also have to make it possible and safe for the perpetrator to say, yes, I did do that. And that will also help some of these parents who don't want to admit that their spouse did something, because then it's the truth is out and the burden is off of them. And I think that's one of the really sad things that happens to what we call the non-perpetrating parent, is that they're left with the burden themselves when the real burden needs to be on the person who committed the molestation in the first place.
Yeah, so true. So true. I mean, what a horrible position for anyone to be in ever.
Right,
Like you
right,
wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I guess until you are the one in the middle of it, you're not quite sure how you would handle that.
right.
But it's and different people handle it differently, obviously. But it is tough. It's so hard. And I feel like in our world, the other part of it is society, right? So there's whatever's going on within the family, but we have the societal issue where women are not believed. We had the
That's right.
whole Me Too movement. And man, I heard people say, oh, women are just saying they just want to be part of the group. And I'm thinking, I'm a woman. I'm not going to say something happened to me if it didn't happen to me. Like,
Right.
you're
You're
not
not.
right. You're
You're
not
not. Who wants to bring that on themselves?
right.
Nobody does. The
Yeah.
shame, the blame, and that's a big part of it, is that women are often, and boys too, but I think it is more women, are not believed necessarily, and they're also blamed.
Mm.
Yeah, it happened, but look at what you were wearing, and you asked for it, and you seduced him, and you wanted it, or you should have screamed, you should have said no, you should have told somebody right away. And so the burden becomes on the victim rather than on the person who hurt them.
Oh my
And
gosh, that's so true. That is so unbelievably ridiculous that this is the way it is. Like,
right,
anybody want to get on a soapbox? This is a great one to get on, I have to say,
right,
is
right.
that I believe the number is less than 5% of rapes in our country are convicted. And I went through
Mm,
this actually with uh, somebody very close to me. And the
mm,
detective at the time told us that they would do everything to get the guy to confess. But if he didn't confess and it goes to trial, that defense attorneys like to have women on the jury because women will say, like what you were saying, well, what was she wearing? Did she really say no? And we'll question the victim who's
mm,
brought it all the way to trial. Who's going to go to trial when it
right.
didn't really happen to them? And then how devastating is it for someone to not be believed? It's like, first of all, it happened, huge devastation, huge trauma that you have to deal with. But it seems like it would multiply the trauma by so much.
It does. It
Yeah.
absolutely does. One of the most healing things you can do for someone who tells their story is to believe them and to really hear the pain and make a safe space for them to release that pain, and be believed and be held in a safe, supportive, compassionate, and wise, psychologically wise space, which is the whole point of telling your story, is to heal, is to take that burden off of your heart and your soul and your body and reclaim your essence and who you were born to be. And that's the purpose. And as a society, this is one of my big wishes, that we would really understand that investing in healing, making healing possible for anybody, regardless of income, gender, race, religion, social status, whatever you want to look at, is that we reclaim our humanness for each other so that we have healed people who aren't running around acting out their pain on themselves and other people. Um, because the cycle will continue, and many people act their pain out on themselves. They become addicts, or they become obsessive, or they become reclusive, or they become such people pleasers that they've lost all sense of self. Um, and of course, there are many people who act out their pain on other people as well. But if we were invested as a society in helping people heal and stopping the cycle, which means also offering healing to the perpetrator, whether they need to be restrained or not, um, then we could break this cycle as a human race. And that's really what psychology has to offer. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not available. Obviously, it's not available to everyone.
right.
And as we're talking about that, I am curious your opinion on uh because I've heard, I'm sure a lot of people have heard that sort of once a molester, always a molester, like you can't change people. Is there truth to that or not truth to that?
I have to say, honestly, I have not worked with the perpetrator population. I've really worked with people, for the most part, who are the victims of that kind of perpetration. I do think that so I'm going to say a general statement. I think that there are people we don't know how to heal. They're so badly damaged. They've been molested or sexually abused from such a young age for such a long time that it's embedded in their coping mechanisms. And those people do need to be restrained with compassion. But I don't think we've even begun to explore as a society how many people actually can be helped, because we still live, and this is the big picture, I think, one of the big pictures of our country and the world. We still live in a very much good and evil paradigm. Some people are good and some people are evil, and the evil people just need to be locked up and throw away the key. And that's a paradigm that really needs to shift. There is no baby that's born a murderer. And unless you're talking about a very, very small percentage of people that are born with some kind of brain anomaly that makes them unable to be, to restrain themselves. But for the most part, there's no baby that's born a molester or a murderer or a rapist or a tyrant. We're just not born that way. We learn those things, and we learn those things from other people. And that's why I wrote my book, America in Therapy, because we need healing on a societal level as well as on the individual level.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, Phyllis, so good and so true. And it kind of gets into our prison system, and that is very broken,
100%.
very broken. And we should look at Norway that does things completely differently, and people
Yeah,
actually come out reformed and get jobs and are members
right,
of society, welcomed.
right.
There's other ways to do it besides the way we're doing it. And it's like this big machine that's been developed over years, that it's a big machine to change, but holy cow, it's got to start somewhere. Somebody's got to do something.
Right. And it changes through, I think, through educating ourselves. Because right now, and I did some research on the prison system, not a lot, but some when I wrote this book. And one of the things that I discovered was that the research shows that way more than 50% of incarcerated people in the United States today have unhealed childhood trauma. So that's also a double whammy. Their symptoms went untreated. And often there was a call for help. They were acting out as young kids. They were stealing something. They were beating people up, or they were the bully on the playground, or they failed to thrive in school, or they were doing drugs or selling them at a young age. Those are cries for help. That's what we know in the field of psychology. It's not that they're bad kids, they're having symptoms. Just like if your body is poisoned with something, it's going to have a symptom. You're going to throw up, you're going to have a fever, something's going to happen. So we know that in the medical field, but we're really slow to get that in the psychological realm, that our worst symptoms are cries for help. Um, and on the largest level, The fact that we're willing to wage war and kill thousands and thousands and millions of innocent people is also a cry for help for our deteriorating mental health.
Mm,
Because why is that true? Very simply, what we know in the world of psychology is mentally healthy people don't want to kill anyone. They don't hate. They have an ability to restrain their most aggressive impulses. They have a desire to heal relationship rather than attack people or isolate them or exploit them or see them as inferior. Mentally healthy people are actually committed to loving kindness and peaceful conflict resolution. And that's a really big one because many, many people never learn peaceful conflict resolution in their homes as well as in their communities or societies. They really learn that might equals right, or that some people are superior and they're entitled to take from others or not, treat them as equals. Um, and these are mental health issues. And one of the reasons why I wrote America in Therapy was to really stress that point, because as a society today, we're really being fed the line that we're suffering from a partisan divide. And my point of view is that that's not the issue. We're suffering from a mental health deficiency, because mentally healthy people will reach across the aisle and try to work out their differences
mm,
without hurting anyone.
mm. Wow. This is so good. This is so good. Because this isn't talked about enough for one thing, and it's not talked about this way, I feel like, for another.
Right.
We have this sort of them and us mentality, right?
Yes.
We put labels on people and that's what they are. And then we make assumptions about the people because of the labels that we put on them. And we're not addressing the individual. And, I think about times like when, like, who was it? Was it when Mandela was in prison and there was a prison guard and they became good friends because they saw him as they saw each other as a person, and
Hmm.
it took a minute probably for both of them, but they saw each other as people. And
Right.
when that happens, all bets are off. I remember a story, seems like it was Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know if it's true. And this is my recollection of it, but a woman was abducted, and she said, my name is, and what's your name, and saw her abductor, wanted her abductor to see her as a person, and he
Right.
ended up not killing her, not hurting her, because he saw her as a person. And man, wouldn't our world be different if we could all see each other that way?
Yeah. And I think what you're pointing to is another huge psychological issue that is not common knowledge. It's certainly common knowledge in our psychotherapy offices, and that is the issue of projection. When a person has an unhealed wound, they're most likely going to project some part of that onto another person. What does that look like? So if they were made to feel inferior in their family, maybe they weren't as smart as their older brother, or they weren't as pretty as their sister, or whatever it was, and they were made to feel less than, chances are that, and that unhealed wound in them is what you might call their shadow side. It's in there, and what happens with the shadow side? We project it onto somebody else because we don't want to feel it ourselves. I don't want to feel inferior, so I'm going to make you feel inferior. Um, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so a lot of what happens with racial discrimination and gender discrimination and economic discrimination, and religious discrimination is this projection of unhealed shadow onto other. If I feel less than or unworthy or unlovable or unattractive or stupid, chances are I'm going to project that onto other people. And I'll tell you a story. I worked with a woman who was a manager in a small office. So she had a couple of people working under her. And she had a very lonely childhood. Her mother was very depressed. She didn't have a lot of friends. She was kind of the last kid picked for the baseball team on the playground. And she had gotten married and divorced, and she was lonely and kind of sad. And what did she do? But she projected unworthiness onto all the people that worked under her. She never gave people any credit for what they were doing. She didn't offer raises. She just recreated for them her childhood. I didn't know that. I couldn't have known that until she started working with that little girl in her that was so lonely and felt so unbelonging and unloved. And she stopped herself mid-sentence in one of our sessions and she said, "Oh my God, this is what I'm doing to the other people around me."
Wow.
So she got it. But if somebody had said that to her, she probably wouldn't have gotten it. She probably would have defended. But seeing it in her own opportunity to heal that hurting child inside of her, then she could accept it because she felt love for that child. And then she could see that she no longer wanted to project that shadow material onto the people around her. And this is possible. This is possible with healing.
Mm. Wow, so important. This is so important and so needed. There's way too much hurt in the world. And if there was a way to first help the people who have been hurt, everybody, like you said early on, but help everyone who's been hurt, but also stop the hurt from happening. Like,
That's right.
right? I mean, you're talking about preventative measures to stop it from
Absolutely.
happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because how do you break a cycle? You have to interrupt it somewhere. If someone is an alcoholic, somewhere along the line, if they want to heal, they have to stop drinking, so it's the same, as a society, that we have to offer that kind of help to people so that they can recover their beautiful essential self. And I don't believe there's a person in the world, there may be people who can't access it because they're too damaged at this point, but I don't think there's a person in this world who doesn't want to be loved, who
Mm.
doesn't want to be safe, who doesn't want to really feel like they're wanted and valued and belong. We come into the world wired that way for love and safe connection. And we don't have it because of all the ways that we've misinterpreted what it means to be a human being and haven't given ourselves the opportunity to heal.
Mm. Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, I think so often you hear people just condemn people and just,
Mm-hmm.
put them away and throw away the key or whatever kind
Totally.
of condemnation. And I love it that the word compassion has come up more than once in the conversation because we should be compassionate toward each other. And yes, you don't like what somebody has done. You hate what somebody has done.
Right.
That's horrible what somebody has done, but there's still a person and they still have the desires like you're talking about to be loved, to feel safe, to be a part, to feel that they offer
Mm-hmm.
value. Like everybody has that. And so if we just disregard everything about somebody because of something they've done, man, I've done things not like
All of us have.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know that I go to jail for any of them, but we've
right.
all done things. And if those things were the things that identified me to other people, that was my label to people. I mean, we'd all have a label, and
That's right.
that wouldn't be
That's
very.
right.
And so compassion, yeah.
There's a wonderful man named Brian Stevenson who works with the criminal population, and I believe, and I hope I'm not saying this incorrectly, I believe he works to try to help people who were wrongly convicted um, be released from prison. And he may do more work than that with the prison system, but he made this statement that I've never forgotten. And what he tells people, you are not the worst thing that ever happened to you or the worst thing you've ever done. And that speaks to that, our essential goodness that we're born with. And we need to know that because many people really don't know that. They've been told they're horrible. They've been told they're unlovable. They've been told they're not wanted. They've been told they're not worthy for much of their lives, and they've come to believe those things, and that's a tragedy.
It really is. It really is because I agree with you so much. Like every person has value. Every single one of us has value, and we're all unique and all different. And that's what makes the world beautiful is that we're all unique and all different. And
Hmm.
we should recognize the differences as beauty, and then help each other out. Like
Yeah.
I mean, this is a huge issue, obviously. It goes into so many different things, so many different areas, from family to prisons to schools to whatever. And and it is hard, like bullies at school. Like I
Right.
have a friend who kind of doesn't know what to do with the bully that her son faces at school all the time. And but that bully is getting hurt somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if it never gets
Absolutely.
addressed with him personally, it's going to continue. Probably
Yeah,
his.
and who's he going to grow up to be? And then who are we going to blame? We blame them, instead of looking at the whole system. Yes, we have to hold each other accountable, but we have to hold each other accountable with wisdom, with compassion, with the desire to heal. And that's the difference between holding each other accountable that way or lock them up and throw away the key and they're a bad person and they were born evil and who cares? And that's just really tragic. I just want to say one thing about the girl that I brought up earlier who told a story that wasn't true, because that's also a sign, a call for help. When a child makes up a story for that kind of attention that isn't totally founded in fact, it is also a call for help. So it's also not a reason to shame or blame anyone, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We just don't, people don't make up, they don't know how to call for help unless they're actually taught. Like if something happened to you, tell someone who will believe you. You deserve help. You didn't, it's not your fault. And someone will be there to help you. If we put that out in society, then people will come forward because they want to be helped.
Yeah. If nobody wants to live a life of,
No.
of shame. I mean, shame is so deep, and I don't know that we deal with shame nearly enough in our world and our society. But man, shame, once it gets in there, it's hard to get it out of there, and it
Right, very
comes in
much.
all different pictures and sizes and in so many different ways. But once you feel that shame, once you have that shame, if you don't deal with it, your life is not easy. I mean,
Right.
how do you love yourself if you're full of
And
shame?
you're more likely to project it onto someone else, if not just continue to project it onto yourself. And I think that's the sad thing. It's a sad thing in our personal lives, and it's beyond sad. It's really tragic when it happens on larger systems, including nations. What if we as a country could feel shame for have appropriate shame, because there is appropriate shame. If I think back on a way that I was hurtful to someone, it's okay if I feel shame about that, as long as I know that's not the essence of who I am and I'm willing to make amends. What if as a country we could feel appropriate shame about having enslaved people and make true amends? For that would be a sign of mental health instead of keeping on projecting our defenses and blaming and shaming our victims.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a great point. That's such a great point. I mean, unless it's dealt with and healed, anything, unless it's dealt with and healed, it's not healed.
That's right.
It's just not healed.
It's not healed.
Yeah. And people can say, well, I didn't own slaves, or my family lived in the North, or you can say whatever, but as a nation, this is how we behaved. This was
Right.
legal in our country. And to not admit it, to not realize the appropriate shame of that, like,
Right.
kidding me? Like, how would that have ever happened? It's
Right.
unfathomable, but it's true. But it actually happened. And the damage that was done, that doesn't go
It's
away.
still right. Still happening.
Yeah,
Right.
there's still, right, the damage is still there. And healing it would change so much. And there are many things like that, really, within probably any country, within society in general, that, man, if you can deal with it, that's when you see change happen. That's
Right.
when a nation can heal.
Right. And we don't even have to know how to do it perfectly, because I don't actually think we do. but we know so much about what could set us on the road of healing. And what you're talking about and what we were just saying really makes me think about the truth and reconciliation that happened around apartheid in South Africa. It wasn't perfect, but it was amazing that a safe space was created for both perpetrators and victims to come together, and for the perpetrators of the atrocities against Black people to hear the stories of what people had suffered at their hands. And the condition of that was that there was indemnity for the perpetrator. And I don't know the perfect model, but I think it was a real beginning of making it safe for a perpetrator to actually hear the impact that they had on people's lives and the suffering that they caused. And for victims to be able to come forward and be heard and be believed and be honored and be respected by the people who had hurt them. And, and I don't know the whole outcome of that. I don't know if it still happens, but it's a model to work with because somehow we have to make it safe for the people who have hurt others to hear the impact of what they've done and maybe have to be accountable, but also to be helped and to be known to be victims themselves.
Mm. Yeah,
I don't actually think there's any other way to break this cycle. I really don't.
yeah.
Putting people in jail, killing them, locking them up, hating them, discriminating against them is never going to work. And in the world of psychology, we know that. It just produces more of the same.
Yeah, so true. So true. We allow that in court, right? Where there's a victim and a perpetrator, and they get found guilty, and then you can make a victim statement, right? You can get up in front of court and you can say how you were hurt. Or I know
Right,
that, like, with the Me Too, with Larry Nanzer in particular, I know the women got their day in court. They whoever wanted to could show up. The judge was unbelievable, like just amazing judge who said, yes, ladies, come and have your day in court and
right.
say what you need to say. And there has to be some healing in that. But the other side of it is, I don't know that it's so much just you're a bad man, you're a bad man. Well, what you did was bad. There's no doubt about it. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And for years, and then people
Right.
knew about it. I mean, all the stuff. There's nothing good about it, but there has to be something about them hearing from a person how it felt
That's
for
right.
them that has to hold some power.
Oh, I think it really does. I think it really, really does. And I would imagine that at least inside some people who have been perpetrators, that there is a desire for healing, that there is a desire to stop what they were doing that was hurtful to other people. And they may need help accessing that. Um, but I don't know if you've ever heard of Greg Boyle, Father Greg Boyle.
Mhm.
Yeah, and his work is incredible. He is someone who he does Homeboy Industries, and he's worked with the rehabilitation of gang members with with love, with love, with providing opportunity, with providing treatment, with providing recovery from addiction, but with love, with seeing the essence inside a person. And so many lives have been turned around as a result of his work. And it's not about shame and blame, and it's not about punishment at all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Recognizing it, just loving the individual and
Yeah,
recognizing the individual, recognizing the person as a person, not as a gang member, not as a criminal, but
right,
as a person. Yeah,
right.
makes so much
And when
difference.
you hear their stories of the trauma that some of these people went through as children with addiction and violence, of course, that's what they learned. And so
What they
that's where deep compassion really comes in. What child who's being beaten or molested or given drugs or seeing their parents shoot up and hit other people or whatever is just going to grow up totally healthy? If you're fed bad emotional mental food, that's conditions how you grow up and how you develop. And that's a societal responsibility as well as an individual one.
Yeah, speak to that as a being a societal responsibility, because there are probably people that are going, no, it's that person doing that to that kid. So where does society play a role?
Well, I think we've mentioned some of the things. For instance, like our prison system, which is very much about shame, blame, and punishment, lock them up and throw away the key. But there's another big factor, and that is that our prison system is a for-profit system. So it's in certain people's best interests to keep people in jail and not rehabilitate them and be committed to that. And that's that's such a sign of poor mental health that there are segments of our society that are willing and wanting to profit off of other people's pain. And that's a societal issue. Not every country has a for-profit prison system and has, the number of people incarcerated that we have today, or people who are, have inordinate sentences for minor crimes because of the color of their skin or their economic class or whatever. So I think there's a lot on a societal level. I think we have to really look at but I think we have to really look at the exploitation factor in our society, that if it's profitable to, and it goes for our health system as well. Are we committed to healing people? Are we committed to preventative medicine? Does that mean that we're going to look at the food we feed people, the air that people breathe, the soil that we grow our crops in that maybe are contributing to cancers and other debilitating diseases and death for many people? It mushrooms out into larger and larger layers of societal responsibility for one another.
Mm,
And the profit factor is often the one in the way.
yeah, money over people, which,
Hmm.
which you just say those words and it sounds so wrong.
Right,
Should never, under any circumstance, be money over people.
right,
Pe- People, if you have a child and someone offers you money for a child, how much money could somebody offer you to give your child away?
right,
Priceless. They're priceless. And
right,
so for to in any situation, want money over people just is wrong. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around, but I've seen it as well. I mean, people get rich on the backs of the poor, and
right,
it's just I don't understand how someone could sleep at night, or maybe it's their belief system, what they've been taught, what's been demonstrated to them, and they need
right.
healing as well. And maybe I should be more compassionate
Mhm.
toward people who are money over people.
Well,
But
I think there's a fine line, and I think people who are psychotherapists face this, and people in other positions of either help or healing or responsibility face this. The fine line is that there is a responsibility to call out abuse. There is a responsibility to say that is not okay. That is wrong. You are hurting people. And you need to be accountable for the pain that you're inflicting on other human beings. And that doesn't mean that calling out violation and atrocity is lacking compassion. Sometimes that is the most compassionate, loving thing to do, is just to name the disease. You can't cure it if you can't name it, and you can't dissect it and look at what makes it up and what makes it continue and what spreads it.
oh my gosh, that's so true. That's so true. I think about that, like in the context of love, that if you're in a relationship that's abusive, it can be very hard to get away. Life
Very,
circumstance, you got to eat, you got to sleep somewhere, you got to be taken care of, whatever the situation. But I do believe that the most loving thing you can do is walk away, to give that person space to heal. Because if you stay, you're just allowing them to just stay in the condition that they're in and just
right.
keep doing what it is that they're doing without having space to think about it, to look at their life, to whatever. So yeah, absolutely. It's the most compassionate, loving thing to do is to call it out. I love the way you said
Mhm.
that. So true. It's so good.
And
Yeah.
it's part of the healing for people who have been victimized to know that what happened to them was abuse. Because many people grow up in abusive homes and they really believe they deserved it. They don't know that it's abuse. It's just the way life was.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so true. Wow. So if there was a step one, is there a step one? Like how do we solve this? How do we help?
Well, I don't know if there's a step one, but I think there's many avenues of approach. And so the avenue of approach that I take in my book, America in Therapy, is to look at what mental health looks like, relatively speaking, because none of us do it perfectly. We all have wounds that we're working out more or less, or we all have, better opportunities than others to be mentally well. But if we look at what is mental health and what is not mental health, what are abuse dynamics? What can you expect in a family where there is abuse that goes that doesn't get stopped and doesn't get treated? You're going to have symptomatic people. So basically, what I outline in my book is what that looks like on the individual and the individual family level, and how could we translate that to looking at our country or larger organizations through the same lens. And the lens is not blame and shame. The lens is understanding what creates abuse and neglect, what perpetuates abuse and neglect, what you can expect if you don't treat it and don't stop it, and how can we embrace those same principles as a country?
Mhm.
Because it's not about blame and shame, it's about healing. It's ultimately about healing and and what we have found, I think, in the world of psychology is that any group of people operates on a family dynamic, like in an office or in a church or in a school or in a business. Um, Groups of people tend to, especially if they haven't had any psychological awareness or healing, we tend to play the same part we played in our family. So the abuser in the family is going to probably be the abusive kind of boss in the office. Not necessarily. I mean, there are people who bend over backwards not to be like the people who hurt them. So I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but these are patterns that you can recognize. The person who was really compliant and never made waves in their family because it was dangerous to do that is probably going to be the person in the office or the school who does the same thing. The bully on the playground is going to look for the kid who won't fight back.
Mhm.
And that happens on the playground. It happens on larger societal levels, that those who end up in positions of power, who never got help for whatever happened to them, and who have identified with the aggressor on some level, look for the populations they can target that can't fight back.
Mhm. Wow.
And we just need to understand this. I feel like education is one of the places to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. People need to know and then know how to deal with it. What are the healthy ways?
Yeah.
What can you do for a friend or what can you do for a family or how do you recognize things? I agree entirely. Education, which is why you're so important to this world and your book is so important because it points those things out, like how to
Yeah.
recognize and then to be able to deal with it. And there are times um, that people just kind of go along with the bully. There are the right,
Right.
yeah. Why is that? That they
Well,
just
I think that there are probably two categories of people who go along with the bully. One are people who themselves have identified with the aggressor, so they're all too happy to identify with the next aggressor. But there are also the people who learn to be compliant and helpless, who are afraid to stand up to the bully. And we have many examples of that I'm sure you've read about in the news over the years of parents who didn't protect their child from a very abusive spouse. Sometimes the child even died and the parent didn't step in. These are highly injured people. They're not bad parents. They're people who froze in the face of that kind of violence and literally could not move to protect themselves or anyone else. And that's happening on large levels in parts of our society today, that there are many people who have been so overpowered, they cannot access that part of themselves to stand up. And when they do, and when they become peaceful demonstrators, that's actually appropriate mental health.
Mm.
Because one of the things that I think, and I mentioned this earlier on, but I want to really highlight it now. One of the most important first steps is nonviolence, a commitment to nonviolence. We will never always agree with one another. We will not always like one another. We may be enraged by what some people believe or how they dress or their sexual orientation or whatever it is they do. Um, but there's no repair if violence is on the table. And we know so much about nonviolent communication. We know so much today about nonviolent conflict resolution skills, and we need those in business, in government, and in our international relations. Because what do you have otherwise? You have our defenses. When a person doesn't feel safe to protect themselves because they know that conflict could erupt into some kind of either verbal or emotional or physical or sexual violence, they're not safe. So what do? They access their defenses. They get tough, they withdraw, they drink, they do whatever they do. Um, and it's the same for a country. When we don't feel safe, what are our defenses? Bombs, drones, weapons of mass destruction. Um, and we're so these health issues are really, if you take it all apart, they're playing out on every level. And we're at this point in human history where we could actually do ourselves in with our defenses.
Mm.
So we have to leave our weapons at the door if we want any hope of healing our human relations.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a big one. That's a big
It's
one.
huge. It's huge and it's so true and so spot on. And the really the biggest weapon, the greatest weapon, the most powerful thing is love.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you said that, because one of the things that I wanted to throw in is that in my experience as a psychotherapist over many, many years, no two people that I've ever worked with have the same story. We all have some variation of whatever happened to us that hurt us that we're trying to heal, right?
Mhm.
Um, and while no two people have exactly the same story, what I have discovered is that the root of our pain, no matter who we are, no matter what our story is, no matter what we've acted out or acted in, the root of our pain is an injury to love and safe belonging for everyone. And therefore, it is healed through love and safe belonging.
Mm.
And
Wow.
that's our ultimate social responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that's going to change the world, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
that's the thing. So, oh my gosh, this has been amazing. You are amazing. American Therapy, where can people buy your book?
Yeah, you can buy it wherever books are sold, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Goodreads, any of the major online booksellers. It's in some bookstores. Um, but if you don't find it in your bookstore, you can always order it online. You can also go to my website, which is my name, phyllisleavitt.com, and you can order the book through my website. I'm on all the social media. And if you ever want to contact me and ask a question or share your story, you can contact me through my website. So
Wow, that's wonderful. Very generous. And I would take Phyllis up on it. If you need to talk to somebody, talk to somebody. If you got some trauma that you haven't dealt with, deal with it. You're just going to be happier, healthier. The people around you are going to be happier because you're going to be healthier. And let's change the world. Let's look at this and let's change the
yeah,
world. Let's not look at it. Sometimes it can be so overwhelming, like, oh, this big
right.
monster. What can we ever possibly do? But we have to do something. If everybody
Right.
does something, right? So even just
Absolutely.
our attitude about things can be a
Right.
big,
And I think we live in a world where, you're supposed to have 10,000 followers or 10 million followers or whatever. And I think it leaves many people feeling like they can't make a difference. And it's just not true. Every single person can make a difference. If you are more loving to one person, you make a difference. If you're more loving to yourself, you're going to be more loving to other people and you're going to make a difference. So if your sphere of influence is millions of people or tens of thousands of people or 100 people or your immediate family and social circle, you can make a difference.
mm,
And the best access to that is doing your own healing work and
yeah.
uncovering your greatest gifts and your greatest potentials and really bringing them to the world because we need you. We need you and you and you and me and you, right?
Mhm, exactly. And it's not too late ever.
Not too late,
Like it
right?
just, yeah, yeah. This has been so good. You're so good. Thank you for everything. Thank you for what you are doing in the world. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for wanting to get more word out there on how we can heal, how we can move on and be a stronger, better, happier, more loving society. I just appreciate you a lot. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you and your insight and your questions, and thank you for having me. I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you know somebody that it would be really good for them to listen to this, please pass it on and let them know. Please buy Phyllis's book. Please look into it, read it. There's probably people you know that it would be a great book for them. It's so easy these days. You can just enter address in the computer on Amazon. You don't have to go to the post office. You don't have to do anything. You can send it right to somebody. And if you think of people that this would be a great book for, which is pretty much everybody, I encourage you to do that, to send a book. It's such a gift to get a book in the mail. And this book in particular is just so good. And so I just encourage you all to do that. And thanks for spending the time with us today. I appreciate all of you. And I just want to say that until we see each other again, I pray that you keep your heart open and you live your love loud.
Mm, beautiful.
Here we go. There's the episode. Holy cow, Phyllis. That was amazing. You're amazing. I appreciate you. All right. I have to figure out how to end the live. And then we'll see what's going on. And then we'll talk for a second.